Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Kelly and today I'm delighted to talk to you about some of the adaptations that we had to make here in growing up in Ireland in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to acknowledge my colleague Dr. Owen McNamara in assisting in getting this presentation together. So for those of you who don't know, Growing Up in Ireland is the national longitudinal study of children and young people in Ireland. The aim is to improve our understanding of the experiences and development of young people with a view to informing policy and services for them. So we currently have two cohorts of young people involved in GUI. The first cohort is cohort 98, and there were 8,500 9-year-olds initially recruited into the study. So interviews were conducted at age 9, age 13, age 17, 18, and age 20. And the planning phase for the age 25 interviews are underway and due to take place in 2023. For the infant cohort then, or cohort 08, there were over 11,000 9-month-olds recruited into the study. Interviews were conducted then at age 3, age 5, there was a postal survey done at age 7, 8, interviews at age 9, and the age 13 interviews are currently underway. So the main focus of this presentation is going to be about the age 13 interviews and how we had to adapt our data collection methodology for this phase. So prior to COVID-19, a normal GUI visit would involve the family getting an advance letter or information pack from the Growing Up in Ireland study team. So this advance letter would inform the family that an upcoming wave of data collection is due to take place and that an interviewer would be in contact with them soon. They'd also receive the informed consent form so that they could read over these and be fully informed about what they were consenting to taking part in. The interviewer would then make a personal visit to the family home to arrange an interview, so this first contact was always face-to-face. The interviewer would then call out to the family home and administer the questionnaires. So both parents and the young person would complete a main and a sensitive questionnaire, with the main questionnaires being completed by computer-assisted personal interviews and the sensitive questionnaires by computer-assisted self-interviews. The interviewer would also take physical measurements for height and weight from all study participants. They would complete a cognitive assessment with the young person, and they would also leave a time use diary with the young person, who would be asked to complete this at a specific day and return it to the GUI offices by post. However, COVID-19 restrictions were first implemented in Ireland in March of 2020. So at this time, we weren't in the middle of any fieldwork, but we were just planning the upcoming pilot phase for the age 13 interviews. So rather than postpone or cancel the data collection, we decided to adapt our data collection methods, and with this came a number of key challenges. So the Growing Up in Ireland staff had to adapt to a remote working environment. We had to consider how we would conduct our interviewer training, how we would make advanced contact with the families. We had to switch our mode of interviewing, and we also had to consider the content of the questionnaires and the type of data that we could collect. So prior to COVID-19, the interviewer training would normally take place in person at the Growing Up in Ireland offices. So for this, interviewers from all over the country would travel to Dublin and complete the training over 3 days. However, during COVID, we decided to conduct this remotely via Microsoft Teams. There was plenty of positive feedback from the interviewers who felt it was very efficient and effective for conducting the training. There were notable cost, time and environmental related benefits associated with not having to travel to Dublin or stay overnight if they were coming from far away. It was also possible to record the presentations, and these were made available to the interviewers who could access them and refresh their memories prior to contacting any of their families if they needed to. Some of the negatives reported were that they missed the social interaction with the staff and the other interviewers, and they also felt it may be less appropriate for inexperienced interviewers. However, this wasn't a huge concern, as it was only experienced interviewers that were recruited for the current wave of fieldwork. So in terms of making advanced contact with the families, prior to COVID, this would have been done in the Growing Up in Ireland offices, where we would have printed and posted the advanced contact letters and forms to the families ourselves. However, as we were all working from home before the pilot phase, we decided to trial a few different options. So some families got an advance letter, some got an advanced email, some got a combination, and some got no advance contact at all. What we found was that those that received advance contact had somewhat improved response rates compared to those that got no advance contact at all, but we're not sure if the difference was significant due to the small numbers. The main finding from this, though, was that the consent process actually ended up being too burdensome, and that was reported by both the interviewers and the respondents in the pilot phase. Because a lot of the respondents didn't look up the dedicated area on the Growing Up in Ireland website that we had set up with the informed consent forms there, the interviewers had a very long script to go through prior to even starting the interviews, which was already a lengthy process. So with that, we decided for the main phase that it was more important to send out the advance letters as before by post, and this was outsourced to another company because the GUI team were still working from home, but this seemed to work extremely well for this phase. So for the current wave, we also had to adapt our mode of interviewing as interviewers could no longer call out to the family homes due to COVID-related restrictions. So the main interviews were switched to computer-assisted telephone interviews, and this is the interviewer's main role for the current fieldwork phase. And the sensitive interviews were switched to computer-assisted web interviews, and these interviews are being hosted by the Central Statistics Office. So the CSO have the secure IT infrastructure for this, and it ensures that the data can remain confidential and anonymous throughout the process. For the pilot phase, we did trial having the 13-year-old complete both their main and sensitive interviews by the web because we thought they might be shy to talk to an interviewer on the phone. However, we only got a 66% response rate from them for the pilot phase, and we were concerned that this was well below the 80 to 85% that we'd normally get. So for the main phase currently underway, we have switched the 13-year-old to completing their main interviews by telephone also, with the hope that it will make it more engaging for them and help to boost their response rates for the current wave. In terms of some of the content-related changes that we had to make, we were primarily concerned with maintaining the longitudinal consistency of the questionnaires. So for the pilot phase in July of 2020, we focused primarily on the COVID-related questions and new items that hadn't been previously tested in Growing Up in Ireland before. And this helped to inform the most important ones to include in the main phase. So the main phase began in July of 2021. And for this, we had a separate COVID section at the beginning of the main questionnaires, rather than interspersing the COVID-related questions throughout the questionnaires. We also altered the wording of a few items. So, for example, when asked about school, they were asked to refer back to when schools were open. We also had to consider the length of some of the questions so that it wasn't too burdensome for the interviewers or the respondents when asking the questions over the phone. We had to change the way that physical measurements were being reported, so these were now self-reported by the respondents on their sensitive questionnaires, and they were also asked to clarify if they were measured or estimated at the time of completing the questionnaire. We had to change the cognitive assessment to one that was suitable to conduct over the phone, so we went with the semantic fluency test, which only took 1 minute and was suitable to do over the phone. And we also had to drop the time use diaries from the current wave due to logistical issues associated with posting them out to the correct families, and if the families were posting them back to the GUI officers, there actually wouldn't have been anyone there to collect them. So it was deemed more appropriate to drop them for the current wave. Okay, finally, to conclude then, we can see that there were significant adaptations made to ensure that fieldwork could continue close to the planned timeline. We're not yet sure how the change in mode or methodology is going to affect the response rates for the current wave, but we're very hopeful that we'll get as close as possible to the 80 to 85% mark that we'd normally achieve. Some of the main negatives reported from the interviewers after the pilot in particular were that they found it was more difficult to maintain a strong rapport with the families in this remote setting, and for that reason many did miss the face-to-face interviewing experience. We also had a loss of accurate physical measurements because they're now being self-reported by the respondents themselves. We had to drop the time use diaries, and we were limited in the type of cognitive assessment that we could conduct in the current wave. However, some adaptations are arguably preferable, particularly in relation to training the interviewers in a remote setting. There were notable environmental and cost-related benefits associated with this. It was also positive that interviewers didn't need to be located close to the families when pairing them up, and this helped to reduce the time associated with travelling to the family home, so interviewers are able to get through more families in a day, which is also a positive to come out of this. Okay, so that concludes my presentation today. I'd like to thank the GUI study team, our colleagues at the department, the CSO and Trinity College, and of course the young people and their families for their continued participation and commitment to the study. And I look forward to answering any questions you might have. Thank you.